You ever get the feeling like you've heard this before? Chords and refrains in popular songs, melodies pulled wholesale from something that came earlier. Seen it before? Cinema dominated by the same stories in the same world with the same cast of characters. Played it before? The same mechanics, the same beats, the same yellow paint telling you where to go next. Video games, books, television, it's the same stuff, the same beats, just different titles.
When writers write to me about following in the footsteps of those who string together nouns and verbs for a living, I tell them this: every story has already been told. Once you've read Anna Karenina, Bleak House, The Sound and the Fury, To Kill a Mockingbird, A Wrinkle in Time, you understand that there's really no reason to write another novel.
It does feel like that sometimes, for as much as there are countless stories across all of media. Surely, for as many people as there are creating, they had to have made it all by now. But you know it's not that simple. Stories are a foundation of our lives, those we create, those we experience ourselves, and those that exist at the same time as us. Even if they feel unoriginal, there is a process to storytelling. Questions that need answers, blanks that need filling, pieces of a puzzle that need rearranging, and it's never really as simple as it seems to be. Technically, all art is derivative. 26 letters make up the English alphabet. 3 primary colors make a spectrum. 12 tones make up the musical chromatic scale. We're pulling from what's established, what we've agreed a thing means when put to page, canvas, or sheet. Somebody, at some time, committed this combination of variables to a final copy, unwittingly becoming a bedrock that somebody else would look at and construct something from likewise. The parts that make up the whole do not reduce the whole. It was a singularity first. Stories, origins, rationale for natural phenomena, a reason for our existence. And then it split. The duality of theater, tragedy, and comedy. It split further. Comedy shoots off into romance, satire, and absurdism. Tragedy begets drama, horror, and the historical. Every time a story doesn't fit neatly into a mold, it creates a new mold. American westerns, science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and so on. Genre has become commonplace as we strive to collect and organize everything that we've created. With video games, interactivity is the core of that experience. How one interacts with it becomes the basis for its categories. You have Souls-likes for their inspiration from Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, Metroidvanias drawn from the maps and upgrades of Metroid's alien caverns and Castlevania's daunting fortresses. Doom clones, as Doom revolutionized first-person gaming before its ilk were ever called first-person shooters. We have categories and genres because we want to know what to expect. We want to know if it's something that we want to experience, not just in terms of our subjective preferences, but what we are emotionally capable of in that moment. Like, if you're coming out of a rough breakup, maybe you seek out similar sadness from a tragedy, or you pop on a romantic comedy to give you a moment of levity. If you're looking to relax, maybe you start playing Stardew Valley and zen out, or you flood your system with Elden Ring. Art is defined by its ability to make us feel something. Foreboding dread, liberating joy, a deep sadness, righteous fury, or catharsis. Categorizing art is a way for us to have a sense of control over what we will probably be made to feel. Maybe all we are doing is chasing what these stories have been proven to incite in us, both in what we seek out and what we choose to create. But do those examples mean less because they weren't the first, because someone technically told that story first? Is Stardew Valley less because it walks a path tread decades ago by Harvest Moon? Storyteller is both a puzzle and a story about stories. Players thumb through 14 chapters of simple narrative premises, rearranging a limited number of elements to bring the premise to life. Rejected by own spouse boils down to proclamations of love, a narratively fitting bout of amnesia, new love sprouting, and the original partner being jilted. All that with 5 elements, 2 events, and 3 characters. The entire game is made up of similar vignettes and variables. Usurper dies, curse is lifted, or double poison. The standard formulae storytellers rely on are themselves made up of formulaic elements. What if we take those elements and put them in a different order, or emphasize a different part of the story? You may not complete the puzzle in Storyteller, but if you bend those elements around, it might be that you make your own story, even if it has the bones of something else. Storyteller reminds us that storytelling is not a monolith made of stone. It is a blueprint sketched in pencil. That brings us to structure and formulae, the paper upon which the blueprints are drafted. The three-act structure gives a story a skeleton. The setup gives way to the confrontation, gives way to the resolution, with peaks and valleys of narrative engagement throughout. Cultures the world over have used something of a structure in their storytelling for millennia. The hero's journey follows a cycle of departure, initiation, and return. A hero leaves home on a difficult journey before triumphing and returning home, changed by the experience and ready to begin it all again. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker leaves Tatooine to learn the ways of the Force and rescue Princess Leia, watches his mentor fall, and destroys the Death Star before returning to the Rebellion, ready to continue defending the galaxy. If you watch Empire and Return, they run through similar journeys. Each Star Wars entry is a circle that keeps spinning back to its starting point, the trilogy itself making up a larger, identical cycle. The Marvel formula introduces a character at a low point, challenges them on the path to be a hero, and provides a climactic opportunity for them to establish or re-establish their heroic stature. Tony Stark is a brilliant but emotionally shallow arms dealer before his business partner has him kidnapped overseas. After a fellow prisoner dies helping him escape, Stark, both in business and action, works to dismantle his company's weapons manufacturing and pushes back against those who possess those weapons. Finally, Stark battles his business partner to prevent the mass production of deadly exosuits, choosing to stand against his own dark reflection and become Iron Man. Storyteller's puzzles are almost all presented in groups of three, like a three-act structure. Things begin, things ramp up, things resolve. Using these standards, both beginning and experienced storytellers can dress the bones however they want to, depending on the story they want to tell. Now, does using or relying on a formula mitigate what a work is capable of meaning? Does the structure dilute the art? Is a house any less impressive because it stands on a solid foundation, held up by a proven framework? Put differently, are we trying to improve or perfect what is already established, or are we trying to innovate and carve out something new? Consider Star Wars again. George Lucas established the story in the 70s and 80s, then returned in the 90s and 2000s to release the films he envisioned, trying to perfect what he had established. 12 years after Lucas wrapped the prequels, The Last Jedi came around, bucking trends that audiences came to expect from the franchise. Rian Johnson was arguably trying to make something new in the galaxy far, far away, shaping what was long established into a new frame, a new lens, a new spin on an old story. When we build this story house, whether by blueprint or vision, are we building it for us, or, for lack of better term, them? Is there a balance between the two? Can there be a balance? Should there be? All questions unfortunately rooted in economics. If a thing will certainly sell, better to sell it, even if the same story has already been told 100 times before. The idea of a remix ripples throughout our stories because we're not just telling the same stories, we're changing how we're telling them. Campfires become stage productions, then books, film, video games, neither better nor worse than the other, but different. Technology advances, whether in the colors we can generate in a flame or the cameras we use to capture frames. It's not always in the rearrangement of the same elements, but in what we can do now that we couldn't do before. Hollywood Animal is a management tycoon most of the time, but if you dig into it, there's a script writing process to play around in, even as the CEO of the studio. Different elements gel with each other like standards and formulae dictate. A cowboy fits in the Wild West stopping a train heist. An adventurer travels to a mysterious island hunting for treasure. The story elements are general pieces that can be slotted all throughout a storyboard. Setting, characters, major themes, and resolutions. Better cameras and audio technology make for a clearer, even a more colorful experience. Investing in soundstage technology makes for better set pieces and more fully realized visions. Opportunities to go back and tell the story you want to tell, how you want it to be told. If you took someone playing Super Mario Bros. In 1985, plopped them down in front of 2023's Super Mario Bros. Wonder, their eyes might melt from the remix. You still run, jump, and dash to the end of the stage, but also, things change on a dime. You can be an elephant. What's different about this familiar journey? The Legend of Zelda couldn't fathom the leaps in fidelity, let alone the gameplay options that would come in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Where there was joy in bombing out pixelated walls and experimenting for secrets in 1986, now there are hundreds of hidden Koroks in the world, 100 ways to tackle a single objective, and Prince Sidon. They are all, in the basest way, the same game given the chance to evolve into something unique, keeping up with and demonstrating what a medium is capable of. But a remix is also an evolution, not just a thing growing into a new time, but adapting to it. Romeo and Juliet, the original play, is about two star-crossed lovers from rival houses whose youthful passion is their own tragic undoing. Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet from 1968 follows the same beats, but they are now free to film on location rather than rely on audience imagination and stage setting. Romeo and Juliet in 1996 retains Shakespearean English while modernizing the setting, props, and certain characters. Othello was released in theaters in 1995, the first mass-released movie that starred a black actor as the titular black character. 2001's O pulled the story into a modern high school setting, retaining its elements of betrayal and deception with a younger ensemble cast. The Taming of the Shrew morphed into 10 Things I Hate About You. Elements of Emma were reflected in Clueless. Pride and Prejudice has seen miniseries and movies adapt the story for decades. And in 2012, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries pulled the narrative out of Victorian England and into an interconnected world of vlogs and webcams. Hamlet saw a 1996 theater release iterating on the epic film style, grand and massive in scale that only a film could capture. And in 2019, over 20 years after the film and centuries after the play, Elsinore was released, a time loop-based video game centered around the tragedy of Hamlet. They are all, in some ways, telling the same story as before, just tweaked for a modern audience or remixed for a modern experience, whatever modern means at that time. Remixes can be a valid form of expression, striving to pull something old and established into a new time, making it relevant to a new generation. Without fail, that new generation picks up the beat and brings it around for the next generation. A melody and a story we've heard 100 times before, and yet somehow never tire of. Stories have always existed in a snapshot of now. They exist in a moment in time, an artifact of a cultural zeitgeist, what is popular and profitable, what is experimental and new. Maybe every story has already been told, but still we twist, change, and refract those stories. We make something new from the bones of what came before. We adapt a story to a new time, a new way of seeing things. You don't level an entire house when you want something new, you build on it. Where the Water Tastes Like Wine explores the storytelling process in 3 ways. First, a life cycle. Players live through a story, then tell it to someone on their travels. I swear that goat by the stream had wings. It was wild, man. They tell the story to others, changing the story to make it theirs, sharing what matters most to them, emphasizing what they see as the most important part, trying to make it subjectively better. In time, as the story is told and retold, that winged goat has taken on a new mythical life, becoming the Jersey Devil cryptid. It has shed its original story, becoming something greater through its retellings. The story has been told already, and yet it changes. Second, in time. The adventure takes place during the Great Depression in 1930s America, dictating the sort of stories that are most prevalent. The struggles of survival, coping with abandonment, the joy of reunification, marvels of the modern city, mysteries just over the horizon, the unease of the unknown. The stories we tell are dictated by the time we find ourselves in, both in what we create anew and what we adapt to this time. Thirdly, through place. The Northwest Mountains have their own stories, but they may not resonate with the edgeless plains of the Midwest, the shorelines of the East, or the deserts in the South and Southwest. As much as students of the craft have been told to write what they know, we don't think as much about how we gravitate towards experiencing what we know. It's often a knee-jerk reaction to seek out something familiar to us, not born of malice or insularity, but of our perspective. The Fall of the House of Usher is an anthology, each episode reinterpreting an old story from Edgar Allan Poe. From The Telltale Heart to The Mask of the Red Death, all these once separate tales now exist on a singular thread brought out of the 1800s and into our now. The setting shifts to the cityscapes of the 2020s, modernized from when the stories were written. The plights of its characters more familiar, more modernized. The way in which the stories have been told past print and onto the screen, modernized. Neither better nor worse than the other, simply different. The stories have been told, and yet they change. Does that diminish its impact if we already know how the story goes, if the story technically already existed? Dracula, the Dance Macabre, is a 4-part fiction podcast retelling the story of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Same setting, same characters, but by the archetypal Act 2, the story has veered into something new and different. Dictated by time and place, a new story stands on the foundation of the source material, no longer a point of comparison, but its own entity, its own story. Listeners don't know where the story goes because it's no longer tied to the original story. Its creator and cast spotlight elements that feel more important in our modern experience, even as the story takes place well over a century ago. Does that diminish its impact? The story has been told, and yet it is changed. Does that make a story less because it is still built on the foundation of a story that came before? Is it even less because it's going off-road because it isn't telling the same story? I've mentioned in other videos that we live in a time of narrative and experiential plenty. Anyone with a phone can record and edit video. Anyone with a computer can download an engine and start building a video game. Anyone with a microphone can start a podcast. Hell, they'll let anyone make a video essay these days. Lowering the hurdle means, a lot of low-grade stuff is going to splurt out into the trough, but it also means that the old barriers to creation won't prevent someone from creating. The absolute surge in independent gaming in the last 15 years is testament to that. So many a product of a game or a playstyle that came before. We have the chance to build something new from the bones and blueprints of what came before, something that we want to see, something that we want to endure, something we want to share. It feels salient to discuss this in these ongoing, unprecedented times. The American federal government continues to chip away at and erode the foundation of a country's democracy. The stories we tell and seek are inspired by the story that we live. On the other side of the world, Palestinian filmmakers have been assaulted, detained, and killed in the wake of their documentary's 2025 Oscars run. Do these stories mean less because the US isn't the first country to nosedive towards authoritarianism? Because Palestine isn't the first country to be violently occupied? Because these aren't new things? We tell our stories now, in these times and these circumstances, because we want our stories to endure. Time changes the individual person, but so does it change the collective people. The old die, the young grow older. People may live through a familiar story, but it never has the same cast. There will always be new storytellers, each a composite of every story and every storyteller that has come before them, a a kaleidoscope with one more stone, one more facet on the lens, one more byline on a well-read story. We will never truly run out of stories to tell because the circumstances in which we tell our stories are always changing. Times of peace and war, a people's history, heritage, and culture. Times of conflict and disagreement, surface level and fundamental. Periods of craze and obsession defining an era before they pass. Technology and craft finding new ways to blend together what previously existed apart.
Every story has already been told. Once you've read Anna Karenina, Bleak House, The Sound and the Fury, To Kill a Mockingbird, A Wrinkle in Time, you understand that there's really no reason to write another novel. Except that each writer brings to the table, if she will let herself, something that no one else in the history of time has ever had, and that is herself. Her personality, her own voice. If she's doing Faulkner imitations, she can stay home. But if she's giving readers something that reflects her character, who she really is, then she's giving them a new and wonderful gift, and giving it to herself too.
Any English story is derived from 26 letters ordered into words one after the next, all for the sole purpose of making us feel something. Any story can be adapted and changed to mean something new, something different, something more. It may feel like every story has already been told, but if you stop and think about it, really think about it, there are so many stories yet to be told. Stories that need to be told. No two people live exactly the same life, so the well of material never runs dry. Any story yet to be or ever told has the power to change someone's world. And so we continue to tell them.